Welcome to episode 8. In this episode, we're going to talk about some basics with layers and cutting and pasting. And I think the best way for us to kind of get our heads around that is to just do something that we would normally do in the library, like a page turn fix. Or improvement, I should say. So what I'm going to do is go to my folder, as I normally do, and I'm going to open the pages that need to be dealt with. First of all, I guess let me show you what I'm going to do so you have a little bit of context. Here we are going to, that's taking a little longer than I expected. There we go. So in this part, 1, 2, you can see there would be some straightening that would have to be done. Page 3, that page turn is okay. We always turn from odd to even. 3 to 4, of course, is the turn. And then 5 to 6 would be the other turn. And here we have 2 measures, but there were some things we noticed in the parts that led us to believe this might be an issue. And so there's a correction that we're going to do. You can see that there's a significant amount of time here at the top of the page where there's 5 measures of rest followed by 4 measures of flute cue. So a total of 9 measures, and that will be much better than the 2.5 measures on the previous page. So let's see how we're going to do that. Back in Photoshop over here, we will close that, and we will just open the pages that we need to edit. So let's assume that everything is straight and good, and in that case, I only need to open pages 5 to 6. That's where the turn is, that's where my issue is for this situation. And so for this one, just to make it not so annoying for everybody, we will go ahead and straighten it. Again, if you go to the episode 3 on transforming, you will see a couple of different ways to straighten. I just did one way there. Okay, so how are we going to handle this? Well, one way, of course, would be to simply put these 3 measures on the previous page. You could move a clef over. But in this case, it was preferable to try to actually keep full width staves, which I think is, personally think is something that's good if you can do that. So what we did is we actually have a little engraving that we did. So we engraved this in engraving software and then saved it to PDF. So this is a different kind of PDF in that it wasn't scanned. It was converted to PDF from software, from engraving software. And so you can even notice the way it looks here. It looks a little differently. We're still going to open it in grayscale, still at 600. The width and height will look differently than what the page size in the engraving software is. That's because it's only showing where there are pixels. And when you save from engraving software, you don't have white pixels. You only have the black pixels. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So that's why those dimensions just look a little different there. Do you see how there's, we're seeing just the canvas, and the only thing that's on the canvas are black pixels. So that's the nice thing about converting to a PDF from software is you don't end up with a background. So that's really great. You'll see why in a minute. So you can see this engraving that was done here where we have a system now starting measure 446 with 5 measures of rest at the end. And then the flute cue is at the top of the next page with these bars. This 445 measures was added simply to get us to the right bar number. We could also then hold our meter here without it showing up later. I mean, there was other ways to do that, but this was just a very quick way to engrave it. And then the extra measure was probably included in 461 just so that the slur would sit properly on the previous measure. So this is what we have to deal with. So I'm going to select my Marquee tool. Let me do that again. M is Marquee. And here we are. Now normally I would want to get I would want to trim this. Using the Alt key, I could easily trim the selection area. If you can't see that, let me zoom in for you. And you can see now I trimmed that area. You can see by the dotted line. But because there is no background, then I don't have to worry about white pixels covering up anything. There's nothing to worry about in this case for that. So I am just going to go ahead and I can copy or cut. I'm going to cut, Control X, and then I just need to paste. I draw the marquee where I want to paste. You'll see at the bottom of the page there. And the reason I do that is because if you don't draw a marquee and you click paste, it'll just pop in the middle of the page. Especially if you have a lot of ink on the page, then that can be tricky to find things, especially if they're smaller. So now I will paste, and you can see that I snipped some of the edge of that. Well, that's very amateur of me, and so let's redo that, but that's good to demonstrate that, I suppose. So we will come back here. We have to go to our history menu to go back, and if you look here, oh yes, look at that. So I'm going to use the Shift key back in Marquee and the Shift to make sure I select all the way to the edge. And now I'll cut. Go back to page 5 and draw my marquee and paste. Okay, so a couple of things here. One thing is you'll notice this isn't quite the same size. It's close. Probably close enough for jazz, as they say. But one of the things that we can do, because there's no background, is I can actually set it right over the existing music to really see how the size matches up. I click V, that's my move tool, and I can nudge this as I see fit. And so let's say that I want to just stretch it a little bit. And I want to make sure, of course, that my proportions are constrained. And so I'm going to just select all. You could also draw a marquee around it. And of course, Command T will. So then if I can get right there, now you'll see it's right up to the bar line. And so that is a much closer alignment. So if your engraving is just a little bit off, then don't worry about it. You can if it's a little bit off as far as scaling and size, because you can always scale it that way, especially when you can see through it. It makes it a lot easier and nicer to do that. So we will bring that down, and I am going to deselect by just clicking here. And now you can see that. Now it's a little close, not the best thing. We definitely have it, maybe you could be confused with this grand staff. So what I'm actually going to want to do is move this up. Now my layers become very helpful. So on the right you can see I have 2 layers. So when you paste, it automatically creates a new layer. So now we're going to take layer 1, and either with the mouse or with the arrow keys, if you just want to move it a little bit, use the mouse. Use the arrow keys to nudge. If you need to move it a little farther, probably use the mouse. So let's take that up there. Still have a little bit of margin room. And then you can see now that now I have a little bit more room to put this, so it's not quite as so the spacing wouldn't be quite as crowded. And we can just probably set it right about there. Now something I might want to do is actually get rid of this window, of course, which I thought I'd taken care of a moment ago, but what we might want to do here is actually get rid of this background, these white pixels, because there inevitably could be a little bit of dust or dirt or some black specks. So a very easy way to do that is this. Now I'm going to do something that is going to create a mistake here. And so if you see, oh, I did not delete the background, I deleted the foreground. So of course Command Z will undo that. Why is that? It's because I had layer 2 selected. So what I was deleting were the pixels in layer 2, which of course is this insert of measure 446 onward. So what I really want to do is make sure I have the right layer selected whenever I do this. So I'm going to select layer 1, and I am going to delete. And so that gets rid of that background, and just that way, if there were any specks or dust or anything that could have clouded or made this a little more unreadable, that's gone. So as I zoom out here, you'll see this is what my page looks like. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to move this up a little bit more. And then I'm going to do what's called Command E. And what that is, if we right click on the layer, you'll see there's an option to merge down. that will merge this layer to the next layer below it. In this case, they are in order. That's convenient. These are all the layers I have. So I'm going to merge that down. So now if I nudge with the arrow keys, if you notice, everything's moving together. Let me go ahead and show you that with the mouse so you can see a little bit better. Now you can see that the engraved insert I put in is now part of layer 1. I merged it down. I merged it onto layer 1. And so there it is. And now I can center this whole thing vertically. Zoom out just enough to make sure I'm happy with the spacing at the top and the bottom. And a second thing I then will do is flatten this image before I'm done. And to do that, I can right-click on this layer, and I then can go here where it says Flatten Image, or a shortcut that I have set up, and I think it's a default. I have to verify that. It's Command-Shift-L or Control-Shift-L. Command-Shift-L. Boom. Flattened. We have now it is a background, and it's a locked background. So now if I click the Move tool and I try to nudge it, cannot nudge. The layer is locked. Right, it's a background. So now if let's say that this is not centered or is in the wrong spot, I can no longer just move it. What I need to do now is I need to actually transform it. So Command or Control T, and then when I'm in transform mode, I can use the arrow keys to nudge that to where it needs to be. Once I hit enter, it transforms it. We're going to undo that for now. So there's our background. So sometimes you actually want to keep things in layers. You may have noticed that I was working in layers up until the end when I was happy with where things were. Of course, if you look closely, you'll see that actually I probably should have had this a little farther to the left, but it's not too late to do that because what I can do now is, and let me just show you another trick here while we're doing this, and that is guides. When you have your rulers out, you can grab a vertical guide from the left ruler. You can grab horizontal guides from the top ruler. These guides do not print. Whenever you're in the move, the V, you can then adjust them, or to get rid of them, we just click and drag it all the way off. And so the guide is an easy way to give you a frame of reference for whether you're lining things up or not. So we're going to try that. And then I drew my marquee here, as you can see. Make sure I'm back in my marquee tool. We'll do a transform, and we'll just nudge it over. But I have to actually select it and transform because it's no longer its own layer. And that's an important distinction to be aware of. So now we have this, and we could say that we're happy with this page. We now have this, 5 measures of rest. We will need to then do the same thing on this page where we would copy and paste this. However, before I do that, I would want to make room for it. And so there's a couple of ways you could do this. We could either transform and move this up on the layer like that. Or something that might be a little easier is if we moved it into its own layer, because we don't really know exactly how much space we're going to need, except we're going to paste over this. I'm sorry, this is a bad example. But let's say that we wanted to have some flexibility there. Well, then layer via cut. Now remember that in this layer, there are both white pixels and black pixels, right? So as you see, I move it over layer 1. The white pixels cover things up, not just the black pixels. But now I can move it wherever I want. And so let's just leave it like that for the sake of an example this time. Before I erase this line, which is what this insert will be replacing, I would like to leave it just so I have a frame of reference. And I'm going to need to come over here just a bit. Let's see here. We need to make sure we have all of it selected. There we go. Again, I don't have to be too surgical here, just because there are no white pixels. I'm going to cut this, go back to page 6, I'm going to scroll in a little bit. Page is a little crooked, as you may notice. Let's go ahead and, right. See, I'm in the wrong layer. So when I click Command T, it is trying to adjust the wrong layer. So I could always do a little bit like that. I could also wait till I paste and have a frame of reference. Again, draw my marquee for where I want to paste. And let's get it into position. This is the right width on this page. Staff size is definitely different. That probably is something we could have done a better job in the engraving process, but be what it is for now. And so now I can select, and you notice that I selected layer 1, so we don't have that same issue of deleting the wrong things. I have a couple of options here. I can use the Shift key to make sure I've selected everything that I want to get rid of. I'm going to leave this piano, I'm going to leave this piano part of it there just to show you another method. So now let's hit delete or backspace, and now you can see we got rid of that. Except we didn't get rid of all this. Well, we can just select E for eraser. Again, E for eraser, and we can erase what we need to erase there. Now, the one thing I don't really like, of course, is this piano is clashing here with this dynamic is clashing with this slur. So again, probably wasn't thought out as well as it could have been in the engraving, but we can also just nudge that up, again, because we still have it as a different layer. And that's the beauty of working in layers, is you can have individual components. So let's say you have a page where you have a lot of white space between individual staves, and you need to fit 2 or 3 more staves on there. And you think you can without it being too crowded, as long as you close up the white space. Well, in that case, it's probably beneficial to take the marquee, and from here, right-click, except I need to be in the right layer, make sure I'm in the right layer first, right-click, layer via cut. So we'll actually remove it from the other layer, the same way we did with the violin 1 and the page number. And now you have this as a separate layer. And so you can have these staves all as separate layers. And just go there. Let's do it again. And I got my, because I'm not in the marquee tool. Right, so M for marquee, right click, layer via cut. You have to be a marquee tool to do that. And so now that we have this other layer. So you could have all these different layers, and then you could use your guides. You could set up a guide to make sure you're not straying. You could even line it up on the clef if you wanted. And then you could adjust those things vertically as needed. So that's one way that layers can be very helpful to you. Now, once you have things in place, let's go ahead and let's adjust the instrument name a bit. Let's bring that down manually. Page number doesn't change. It still is page 6. We simply have changed how the measures are laid out between 5 and 6. Okay, so there we are. So now, if you remember, I can do a Command or Control E, and I merge that down, and I merge that down. The layers over here, if you're watching, are all merging to the layer below them. Now everything is layer 1. See that? All of it. That's a good thing. Let's go back to this merge down, because another way we can accomplish the same thing is the Command Shift L or Control Shift L, and that automatically flattens everything onto a background. The only time I wouldn't want to use Command Shift L or the flatten image is if I have some text layers. And we'll talk about that in a following episode about working with text. Text, in order to flatten it, it has to convert it to an image. It has to rasterize the text. And I find that the text just doesn't print with the same clarity when it's rasterized. So we do not flatten our text layers. That's the only layers we don't flatten. But we try to flatten the other layers, otherwise your file sizes will be bigger than you need to be. So one last example for you on working with layers and something that you might encounter, whether it be errata or well, probably that's what this would be. But let's say you found a mezzo forte is missing somewhere, and you found this beauty. So we can right-click on it, and we could copy it, but we could also do layer via copy. We can select this, and now you see here I have a layer. Now when I move it, notice there's another one there. So I made a new layer by copying. Earlier we were doing layer via cut. This was layer via copy. Now I'm going to delete this layer. I can hit the delete button. The other thing I can do, there we go. And so dock that back. You see down here we have the delete layer. So I'm just going to delete that layer. It's gone. Of course, a very simple way to also do this would be Command C or Control C. It's copy. And then wherever you need to put your mezzo forte, draw your marquee, and Command V or Control V on a PC. And we can nudge it or use a mouse to move it into place. Once we've done that, we can then Command E to merge it down to the background. So that's another great way we can use the copy and paste tool and the layers to work for our benefit. Obviously, this does not belong here musically, so we're going to go ahead and delete that using the eraser tool. So that's a little bit about layers and copying and pasting, and there's an example of a page turn correction using engraving software with Photoshop. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section, and we'll do a subsequent video to try to answer your questions. Or maybe if it's simple enough, I'll just reply to you, hopefully with an answer. Stay tuned for the upcoming episodes, which will involve working with text and also how to do boxes and circles for rehearsal figures.